Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's good to see you all here, friends and family members of Lakeisha who are here with us, and many others who are joining us online, wherever you are. We are so grateful to welcome you here in this evening. My name is Valentour Fellow. I'm the Acting Director of the World Mission Initiative, one of the program within the neighborhood collaborative within the seminary. So we are grateful for you and to welcome you all here. So for this evening, before I introduce our two special people up front here, I will give just quick housekeeping. For those of you who are here, if you happen to want to use a restroom is out in the back there on the left. And then there's some refreshment you are free to grab whenever you feel need to. And then for those of you who are joining online for question, please go ahead. If you have any question, you can post on the Q&A section. And for those of you who are here, there will be a chance for you to come forward with this microphone and ask your question. So this evening we gather because we are so excited to hear and learn from Lakeisha McCoy Aquino, our MDiv student, who is also our Valentour Fellow this summer. Through the Valentour Fellowship, every year a student or a couple student were able to get a chance to travel for 7 to 12 weeks to research and study on a specific topic that the student choose, and to travel outside the United States to learn from the church in the global south, how they address issues of interest of the student. So Lakeisha this summer traveled to South Korea, Ethiopia, and then Ghana to research and to study how art, culture, and theology intersects and also shape the people and Christian within those contexts, 3 countries. With her background in, with her background in marketing and communication, Lakeisha will present her research and learning this evening with a combination of presentation and conversation this evening with the title The Art of Theology, How Christianity Indigenizes into Artistic Vernaculars. Lakeisha, conversation partner this evening is Dr. Ryan Ramsey, our visiting assistant professor of history and world Christianity. I learned that it was through Dr. Ramsey's class on world Christianity last year, or last fall, I believe, that Lakeisha's interest on this topic, research topic, took shape. I'm so grateful to see how these two work together and collaboratively, and through the support of many others that Lakeisha able to present and share her learning with us this evening. So with that, I welcome Lakeisha and Dr. Ramsey to share with us this evening.
Thank you, Bala, for your wonderful introduction, as well as yours and WMI's support of Lakeisha and her research. The Valentour Fellowship is unique within the fields of world Christianity, mission studies, and intercultural theology. There are few, if any, organizations that support this kind of project, especially for a seminary student. This fellowship is a gift for Lakeisha and for all of us here as the PTS community. Now, Lakeisha has a particular history and skill set that enable her to do this kind of project. This kind of project which, in time, I think, will be a gift for those of you here who are teachers, ministers, and aspiring scholars. This fellowship and WMI have also been a gift for the church, which includes, but is not limited to, the great variety of congregations and different traditions in Lalibela, Akropong, Seoul, New York, Miami, and here in Pittsburgh. Lakeisha's research through WMI is moreover a gift for the academy, especially world Christianity as a field of academic study. Lakeisha's project is innovative for world Christianity in I think about 3 ways. First, the scope and breadth of her project, providing rich comparative angles and even at times transcontinental connections. That's 1. 2, the argument of her work, expanding perhaps the oldest insight of the field, I won't tell you what that is, she'll tell you, in a way meaningful for world Christianity discourse today. And third, the form of her research output. That is the video series, which you'll see little clips of today. As Bala mentioned, her presentation today will be a kind of fireside chat or director meets audience sort of conversation. You'll see clips and hear her candid responses to questions about her research. Later, you all will have the opportunity to ask her your own questions, so please be thinking of those as we're going along. Now, as I just mentioned, Lakeisha's work has a place within world Christianity as a field of study. So, question 1 here. Lakeisha, in your own words, could you tell us how your Valentour Fellowship research connects to the broader field of world Christianity?
Yes, thank you for that, Professor Ramsey, and thank you, Bala, and thank you, everybody here, friends, family, colleagues, my cohort. Just thank you for everyone, both in this room who came to hear about this research and learn more about my insights, and those online too who actually contacted me and said, "What's the link?" I want to make sure that I catch it. So thank you all for joining this wonderful conversation. So Professor Ramsey, you mentioned that insight, and as I was thinking about this initially when I was in your class, the insight that I was exposed to is that the growth of Christianity, the spread of Christianity, is really anchored in linguistic vernacular translation. In layman's terms, the spread of Christianity is really rooted in how the Bible is translated in local cultures. This got me to thinking, and this insight, this thesis came from a renowned scholar of world Christianity, Layman Sena. Now, when I was thinking about what this means, especially against my background, having a background in art and communications, it made me wonder if it stops there. I wanted to expand on this thinking because I firmly believe that in order to fully enculturate it, the faith needs to be embodied. And so in order to embody it, I wanted to explore how art sort of helps to facilitate that embodiment in that enculturation. So I set out on this project over the summer to explore this. I decided, and it's been mentioned, I decided on 3 different countries for 3 different reasons. I decided on Ghana because Ghana, shout out to my Ghanaian classmate. I decided on Ghana because as of 2025, almost 80% of Ghanaians actively consider themselves Christian. And if you look at where that number was in 1960, after the independence of Ghana, it was more around 40%. That's a rapid spread of Christianity in a very short period of time. Then I decided on Korea for unique reasons in and of itself. In Korea, in South Korea specifically, 1/3 of the country identifies as Christian. Now, this is a country that has very interesting and complex religious roots. It has shamanism, it has Confucianism, it has Buddhism. How did the country at the turn of the century in 1902 go from 2% identifying as Christians to over 30% today identifying as Christians? So that got me to wanting to explore more, and their adoption of Christianity came in quite a few waves. And then the third country that I chose, Ethiopia, I chose Ethiopia because it is a very unique country. It is one of the few countries that adopted Christianity without any Western missionary influence. It became a Christian state in the 4th century. So it's been a Christian nation for a very, very, very long time. And I wanted to understand what was its enculturation and how it became enculturated into the faith. So those are sort of the ways in which I believe the research joins the world Christianity conversation.
Okay, so you've given us a lens.
Yeah.
And you've given us 3 very different contexts. So using that lens, is there anything you found that cut across all those 3 contexts? Maybe any insights?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to actually share today. And I'm going to start with the first insight. As Professor Ramsey says, I am concurrently working on a video series to really highlight the documentation of my research. And for the first insight, what I really learned is that visual expression engenders cultural unity and nationalism. And I saw this cut across all 3 of the countries. So specifically though, in Ethiopia, it is very pronounced. And so I thought what I would do is first share a video clip of Ethiopia and then go into more of the detail of the insight.
Ethiopia is more than humanity's birthplace. It is one of the 5 oldest nations in history. Unlike nations of old, it still endures today. A land where more than 70% of its people call themselves Christian. A land that did not receive faith as conquest, but claimed it as its own. In Ethiopia, Christianity did not arrive as foreign. It was carved into stone, sung in Ge'ez, painted in the likeness of its people. Byzantine forms became Ethiopian colors. Icons bore Ethiopian skin. Theology became art, and art became the language of a nation. This is Ethiopia, a kingdom whose faith is spoken in art that proclaims its national identity.
So, it was 1896. It was a big battle in African history, the Battle of Adwa.
The Battle of Adwa.
Yes, it was 1896. This part also we can see Menelik.
A nation whose story was written not only in words, but in stone, paint, and worship.
Sorry, I was just engrossed in the video. It's just really fun to get a taste of the visuals here and really see your own artistic contribution to this as it's art about art in a way. So as you say in the video, Ethiopia really has one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions. Could you share a little bit with us about how it first came into being? And maybe from your research, what local aesthetics kind of took root. So, that all the old stuff, 4th century, and then also some of that stuff you saw when you were there this summer.
Yeah. So as you said, it's one of the oldest nations. I mean, fun fact: Ethiopia became a Christian nation even before it was the state-sanctioned religion of the empire, of the Roman Empire, right? So about a generation before. So it's been embedded in the culture for a very long time. I think it would be helpful to maybe share a little bit of history around Christianity in Ethiopia, and then we can talk about the aesthetics. So, and just for the sake of this conversation, when I use the word aesthetics, I'm talking about beauty, how the culture sees beauty, how they express beauty. So Christianity came to Ethiopia through Frumentius. Frumentius was a young man when him and his family were traveling down the coast of the Red Sea and became shipwrecked. Only he and his brother survived, and they were taken to the royal court, where the royal court found them to be quite valuable. Frumentius himself became the tutor of Prince Isaiah at the time, and Frumentius was a Syrian Christian. So he was tutoring Prince Isaiah, who, when Prince Isaiah became King Isaiah, with the involvement of Frumentius, he actually decided to convert the religion there in Ethiopia from a religion that was polytheistic, from a religion where they had worship of the gods, sun and moon gods, to a Christian religion, to a sanctioned, state-sanctioned religion of Ethiopia, so that Ethiopia would be fully Christian. And Frumentius ended up becoming Bishop Frumentius, and today he's considered a saint. Now, this was initially a very elite religion. It was a religion that was accessible only for those that could read and write. But in about a century, there was the arrival of the 9 saints. And I just want to share a little bit about what the 9 saints contributed to the aesthetics of the faith. So the 9 saints, and there's not a whole lot of detail about the 9 saints except that they were Egyptian monastics. It was thought that they might have been Syrian monastics, but it turns out they are Egyptian monastics, is what they know. That's recent research. Now these monastic saints brought this monastic tradition to Ethiopia. And the importance of the conversation around aesthetics is that this became sort of the house for all things Ethiopian culture. These 9 saints, they came, they helped the Ethiopians translate the Ge'ez, which is their native tongue. They helped to translate the scripture into Ge'ez. And in order to make the religion a religion for the people, they put the scripture in a sort of an illustrated manner, number one, and also they brought in the Ethiopian aesthetics. So the red, the yellow, the greens, and they were also, responsible for the murals and the icons and putting those into uniquely Ethiopian aesthetics. And how this made the movement for the people is that this was the first time that people were able to read it without needing to be literate. They were able to see it and see themselves in this story in their own aesthetics. Almond-shaped eyes, like I said, the colors of Ethiopia. These became very important sort of guardians of the culture and the faith, and helped to spread the faith. And also, even when you go to Ethiopia today, the monastic tradition is a huge part of the faith in Ethiopia. There are monasteries all over the country. So this is really where the aesthetics got embedded into the Ethiopian sort of framework.
Okay, so we have monks, we have vernacularized text in the Ge'ez, we have colors and iconography. I love this. They're reading it without needing literacy, without needing to be literate, seeing themselves in the icons, and that is where it takes into the question of nationalism a little bit. And so that's my question for you. There seems to be a sense here where Christianity and really the Ethiopian monarchy get kind of united. So how, and perhaps to what extent, did this kind of marriage of Christian and Ethiopian national identities come about? And how did you see it in action during your research? Again, taking the old historical stuff and thinking about the stuff that you saw this summer.
Yes, so that's an excellent question. So you mentioned the monks and in the monastic traditions. And monks and nuns are very critical in being guardians of the faith, guardians of the tradition. So the monks are the artisans, the monks are the scribes, they're the painters. They are the ones who craft every single mural, every single icon that gets demonstrated within the monasteries. So the monks are the ones who are the guardians of the faith, the guardians of the visual tradition, and they have been handing down this tradition for many, many, many generations. I would say the second piece of the nationalism is the Kabra Nagas. The Kabra Nagas is a graphic epic, and it is the national lore of Ethiopia. It's political, it's religious, and it really sets the national tone for how Ethiopians express their faith. So a little bit of detail about the Kabra Nagas. The Kabra Nagas is a national lore. It talks about King Solomon and Queen, Queen Sheba, yes, thank you. Queen Sheba. Now, the cool thing about this national lore is that when Queen Sheba goes to Jerusalem and she meets King Solomon, they have a son, and they name him Menelik, Menelik the First. And as the national lore goes, Menelik the First brings back the Ark of the Covenant, and it's still housed in Ethiopia today, based on their national lore. The important detail when it comes to the conversation around nationalism and the Ethiopian aesthetic and the Kabra Nagas is that this graphic epic is deeply rooted in the Ethiopian look and feel. You'll see Queen Sheba, you'll see King Solomon in these blue and red robes, these gold crowns that even the emperors all the way up until Haile Selassie in the 20th century, still adorn themselves in the same look and feel. So for over 1,000 years, this has, really been embedded in their national narrative, this story of the Kabra Nagas. Now, I would add on to this. So the Kabra Nagas is an important part of their national story, even up until the 20th century. The other part of the national story is actually centered on devotion. So we went to Haram Bara Beher, which is a workshop that they have in Addis Ababa. And at this workshop, monks and nuns, they come together to paint the icons, to carve the religious artifacts, the crosses, to write in script. They have memorized the Bible, and they write every single thing in hand from memory. And so when you go to a sacred space in any part of Ethiopia and you touch the Bible, that's a form of devotion that it never really sunk into my head until I saw this experience. And I asked my guide, well, how does the experience sort of become a form of devotion? Mm-hmm. And she had told me that every day before they start creating the art and the icons and the iconography, that they pray. They get together collectively and they pray and they sing hymns, and then they commence their creation, their art making. And so that to me really stood out, that this is sacred what they're doing. This is devotional work. Not to be long-winded about your question, but I just want to share one more detail here, and that is, so we talked about the devotional, we talked about the national, and here it all comes together. This is St. Miriam's Cathedral in Addis Ababa. what is so fascinating about this is at the top, you will see a mural of the Battle of Adwa, which took place in 1896. Just for a little bit of background and context, the Battle of Adwa was when, during the scramble for Africa, Ethiopia had to defend themselves against the Italians. And what you see there is a mural that shows the Battle of Adwa and how Ethiopia protected their land and won against the Italians who were trying to colonize Ethiopia. And right below this mural, you'll see an icon of Jesus and you'll see an icon of Mary. And so this is just a very, very good example of how faith, the sacred and the national are combined. They're interrelated. There's a symbiotic relationship. They're not separated. They go hand in hand.
Wow. So is aesthetics, nationalism, Christianity, that's a lot to chew on. And I imagine there may be some, write down your questions. But buried in, not buried, but a key part of that is you're talking about the icon creation themselves. And so I think this is a good time to transition to the next country, really, to South Korea, where you actually are working with artists, you're talking with them, and although I will say there are different kinds of artists, so than maybe these, but perhaps there's I think you see some similarities that maybe on the surface, you're seeing similarities that aren't as clear on the surface. So I'm interested in if we can move to that next.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Professor Ramsey mentioned, my next insight from my research over the summer was that artists are theologians. I was really excited to see that insight emerge as I'm an artist and I am here in seminary, so I really saw a lot of myself in these artists. So what I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to use South Korea as a case study, but this is a wonderful artist that I got a chance to meet in South Korea. His name is Elder Kim, and he really does do a fantastic job of showing how artists are also theologians.
Not all visual theology hangs in cathedrals. Sometimes it arrives tucked inside a Sunday bulletin. For 30 years, Elder Kim, an artist and professor, has designed the bulletin covers of Hanbit Presbyterian Church, a congregation committed to social justice and the Protestant tradition. Hanbit's theology is drawn, printed, and handed out weekly, like a living gospel.
간혹 발표하고 개인적인 신앙 고백으로 주로 표지를 지금 작업하고 있습니다.
As part of my personal faith journey, I have been drawing the art for the bulletin. So 이거 몇 년 동안 하셨죠?
30년?
About 30 years.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So, this particular one, I love that it's one light and the cross seems like the light is coming from it. How did you get inspired to do this particular design?
이건 목판이 아니고 드로잉. 직접 써서
So this actually was the art for the 60th anniversary of this church.
Wow.
And at that time, he wanted to express the pain and the suffering and also the joy and the happiness that comes out of the cross. And this one is it will say Hanbit, meaning the name of this church, also great light, and it comes as the light comes out of the cross, it'll spread out to the world.
I love that, especially the Protestantness of it. that I think a lot of us here can probably relate to without too many mental gymnastics, art and bulletins. But that brings us to a pretty critical question here. In traditions such as Ethiopian Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, artists often have templates for their religious art. They create within explicitly sacred communities where icons, frescoes, etc. serve liturgical, worshipful functions. But how are you seeing this visual theology show up in Protestant contexts, shaped by perhaps the Reformation's notoriously iconoclastic legacy? Not wholesale, but oftentimes.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So if we look at Elder Kim's work, this is another one of his bulletins. You'll see in this, it's hard to see from, too far of a distance, but inside, this is an image of a cross, or should I say a composite of a cross, or a collage of a cross. I think collage is a good word. And inside of that collage, you will find all of these uniquely Korean moments, whether that is the Korean War, whether that is the comfort women, which were the women who were sold into sex slavery during the Korean War by the Japanese. You'll see the Korean Presbyterian Church, a lot of wonderful things in this collage. And to answer your question, how this ties back to Protestantism. What I learned from a Protestant tradition is that even though I would interview theologians and they would say, no, it's nothing but the word of God, the artists would see themselves so differently. Their message would be subtle but incredibly powerful. Elder Kim, for example, he sees his work as sort of like a triad. You have on Sunday, you have the sermon being preached out the pulpit. You have the hymnal with a wonderful set of songs to sort of bring the sermon and the liturgy to life. And then you have the bulletin. The bulletin is subtle, but for Elder Kim, the bulletin is quite powerful because this is his theology, and it's joining the conversation. So even within the Protestant sort of conversation, the artists do see themselves as bringing a new visual layer to the word itself.
Okay, so it's theology, and what you're seeing is a particular kind of theology, perhaps a theology that doesn't just come from the pulpit even, but has a different kind of power. There seems to be these themes, these kind of justice-oriented themes, social justice, ecological justice, feminist concerns, these sorts of things. How did you see maybe these kinds of themes pulling out of Korea's visual theology?
Yeah, I have a few examples of how these themes were visualized. So I'm gonna take this artist, Miss Haydang. She considers herself a Christian theologian, but her art is displayed in secular spaces, in major exhibits globally. Now, when I met her, she said, I'm going to create a piece of art for you. You will see my name is in the art in two ways, in the English text, Lakeisha, but then in Hangul. So her art is really anchored in Hangul. Hangul is the script of South Korea, and it's quite visual in and of itself. Now, she asked me, when I think of my faith, what word comes to mind? And I said, freedom. And she said, okay, great. She put together this piece of art, and on the right-hand side, you'll see 3 words in Korea, but visually, that represents how she expresses the concept of freedom. And that is love, faith, and hope. For her, that is what freedom is, and that is what Christ sort of represents. That's artist number 1. I'm going to go in rapid succession here. This is artist 2 of 3. This is Kim Ki-chang. Now, Kim Ki-chang is another artist who came about he was already quite famous, but he was famous during the Korean War. And after the war ended, Korea was literally divided between North and South. It was a country, a region that was trying to find meaning and hope. And this is when Kim Ki-chang stepped into the conversation and began to resituate Jesus in Korean aesthetics. So you'll see here the photo of his work on the left is the nativity scene. And it looks like it's in Korea. It looks like it's on the Korean countryside because that is very intentional. The image on the right is Jesus with his disciples. And again, you'll see Jesus and his disciples in hanbok, which is the native Korean garb. You'll see them looking like Koreans because that is very intentional. And this, for a nation that was trying, in the process of healing itself, this is his visual theology of Christ coming into the world and helping to make sense of this challenging time that the Koreans were facing. And then the last visual theologian that I'm going to share with you is really a theologian who emerged out of the Minjung theology movement. For those who don't know about Minjung theology, it's basically the liberation theology of Korea. And Minjung theology came at a time where South Korea was going through authoritarian rule, and this sparked deep unrest within South Korea. They wanted to really put a fine point on the fact that workers, farmers, students, they felt extremely disenfranchised. And Minjung theology was a theology for the people to show that God is coming into the world through the people. So you'll see there an image of the cross, and inside of the cross are the workers, the farmers, the students, representing the voice of the people, and God becoming incarnate through Jesus Christ into the world through the people and with the people. So these are like some of the social justice and feminist movements that I saw from the artists while I was in Korea.
God is coming into the world through the people.
Exactly.
So these are very different art forms, 3 very different images you've given us, and not even including Elder Kim's image. They're different contexts, they're in which the art is being done and to which the audiences are. But the key seems to be that Christian faith is finding a home in these places. So I think that actually can turn us well to the final context, to Ghana. So could you take us that direction now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my third and final insight, and I'll probably discover more insights over time, but these are the ones that really stood out to me as I began to unpack my research. The third and final insight is that Gospels take much deeper root and also provide a sense of agency when it is localized through art, iconography, and symbols. And Ghana is a fantastic example of symbols and textiles really helping to enculturate the Gospels. I will play this last video that really kind of brings this idea to life.
Ghana became the first sub-Saharan nation to gain post-colonial independence. A society once shaped by empire now birthed theologians and artists reclaiming its culture, crafting a faith uniquely their own. And for me, it's not just history, it's inheritance.
What's the difference between this and this?
This one is representing the Ghana color.
This is a story of return, not just of mine, but of a people's. A return to the God who was already there.
It used to be called the door of no return, but there's been reparations made, and
In 1995, Ghana officially changed that plaque to say the door of return. Not just returning, Ghana is reshaping the past into a new faith through Christ.
So this is a Ghanaian dress that has a northern origin. It comes from the north.
It comes from the north.
Yes, it is referred to as fugu or batakari. Batakari or fugu. Now, when you take that one, it means that it is for protection. One oral theologian known as Ethiopia, who is dead, described Jesus as the batakari Kessie. Described Jesus as the great batakari. It encompasses protection. You know, you are an African and you know that when it comes to issues of spiritual attacks and spiritual forces,
right,
we believe in that so much. So we need what we call Christology of power.
I actually hadn't seen all of that yet. That's the one that's the one that you've been working on, and the script. Yeah, I've read the script, but I actually hadn't seen all that yet. So it's really fun. But yeah, from that clip, I think it's pretty fascinating to see this kind of Christology of power woven into fabric, woven into garments, textiles, symbols of the Ghanaian people. Again, it really shows how Christianity has made a home, in a way incarnated, as you intuited earlier when we were in Korea. But so from your research, how does this take shape?
Yeah, so Ghana has one of the most interesting stories when it comes to how Christianity was introduced. So Christianity was first introduced to Ghana through colonial forts, through Cape Coast Castle, through Fort Elmina, by the Portuguese who set up these forts. Inside of these forts, they have they set up chapels, Catholic chapels, where the traders and the seamen trading in gold and spices would go to the chapels in between their trade routes. Now, what paradoxically emerged during the transatlantic slave trade is that these same chapels, and this is a picture that I took when I was at Cape Coast Castle. These same chapels would sit over top of slave dungeons. So at the top, on Sundays, these traders would be going to their Sunday mass, and below they would hear the cries of the enslaved, and right before they're being transmitted across the West. And this carried on for much of the slave trade. So the Christian word did not get much past these forts for the first couple hundred years, until the abolishment of slavery by the British in 1835. And after slavery was abolished in Ghana, the first missionary waves came to Ghana. They came to Ghana first through Basel and Jamaican Moravian missionaries who collaborated with the chiefs. The chiefs were sort of the guardians of the faith, the guardians of the people of Ghana, and the missionaries had to collaborate with the chiefs in order to bring this new doctrine to the Ghanaians. But this is really where it gets quite interesting, because when I interviewed the Ghanaians, especially the Ghanaian theologians, they said we already knew this God. And one of the reasons why there was an embrace of Christianity initially is because this God was quite recognizable to the Ghanaians. Now, the second wave of missionary activity coincided with the Scramble for Africa. For those who might not be familiar with what the Scramble for Africa is, in the late 19th and early 20th century, a handful of European countries got together and decided to cut up and consolidate Africa and colonize it for, for their resources and so on and so forth. And during the scramble for Africa, specifically in Ghana, the missionaries that came during this wave spent more of their time trying to civilize the Ghanaians and sort of take their icons and their symbols in which they had expressed their faith and say that they were pagan, and so really sort of block them from expressing their faith through, or synthesizing even Christ through their symbols and their textiles. But Ghanaians did not actually take this wholesale. The Ghanaians took what made sense, the education that was planted by the missionaries, the scripture in which they, were able to formulate this Christology of power, and they picked and choose essentially the rest that they felt was meaningful for them and gave them agency.
I love this because what you're doing is you're shifting the story. You're shifting the story to how the Ghanaian Christians understood themselves. You're telling us the colonial history, but then you're privileging a different kind of story. And in order to privilege that different kind of story, you're actually having to read the garments. You're actually having to talk to these people. So your argument here is Christianity wasn't simply imposed, or when it was imposed, it didn't work super well. But the Christianity that actually takes root is this way of embracing the divine reality that they already understood to be there. So now, how did they overcome this stigma of this colonial history of what Christianity had been that surrounded, the way that, particularly colonists and people in this world thought they might have understood symbols and proverbs from Ghana? How did they overcome that and ultimately integrate this as part of their Christian witness?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So coming out of the scramble for Africa, you started to see this grassroots movement of unordained theologians, of people in the urban and rural areas embracing their Christian faith, evangelizing about their faith, and at the same time they began to really also embrace their indigenous symbols and started to synthesize their Christianity through their symbols. So one of the key symbols, Janame, it means, only God. And they started to really reclaim these symbols. And so you'll see here, chiefs and elders are wearing their textiles with these symbols woven in. And this is at a Christian ceremony. So they basically became a bit unapologetic.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Lakeisha, I think this may be a good place to start moving towards questions from the audience now. You've given us a lot to chew on, a lot of different things. You've given us 3 countries, insights, contexts. You've shown how how theology is translated not just through words, but through symbols, aesthetics, color, symbol, story, all these things. So so we'll hand over the mic. If you would like to, Bobby's going to move the mic up here, and if you would like to, you can approach the mic, and I'll kind of, or I can bring it around if that's helpful. But please come with your questions when you're ready.
Hi, thank you so much for giving this presentation, and it sounds like you're a hybrid student, so thank you for coming all the way over here to do that. This was so insightful. Thank you so much. I know, unfortunately, the art of theology, there's only so many courses we can take at seminary to give this a little insight. I can tell that this is just a drop in the bucket of all that you've learned. And I guess my question was, how did you decide to look at what particular art forms you decided on looking at? And then also, how has that made you want to continue looking at the art of theology, not just in this place, but in other places in the world?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that. And if I could, I would go to every place in the world and just, sort of dork out on this research. I actually didn't choose the art forms. I feel like the art forms emerged in the research. So in Ghana, when I would talk to the theologians about how they're expressing themselves, the theologians and the scholars, and Ghana is a really great example of this because they have begun to codify their expression of their theology through their symbols, and they call it symbolic theology. So they've really embraced this, and they've started to do a lot of work around this. But I did not know that they expressed themselves through Adinkra symbols. It emerged through the research and through having a lot of conversations, and then talking to the artists, and then I got to see how they express themselves. I had never heard of Minjung theology until I went to South Korea, and I interviewed an artist who said, when she first became an artist, she became an artist because of Minjung theology, and she wanted to be able to express her social justice, her stance on social justice through her art. So that is really how these art forms emerged, is just from learning from the people directly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I think we've got one in the chat that Bobby will read.
Yes, this is from Anne Marie Mingo. She is not able to stay for the full thing, but I think she's still on, so I think we caught you in time. She says, I will not be able to stay on for the full presentation, but I absolutely love Lakeisha's research and its powerful and accessible medium of delivery. In addition to the theologies that you identify through the arts, I also hear ethics showing up in your presentation. Always ethics. Are there any commonalities of perhaps quests for liberation and self-determination through the living out of faith that you also observed?
I mean, over and over again, and that's a wonderful question. So she's still on. Thank you for that, Dr. Mingo. Over and over again, and I think faith in general is embraced and lived out through ethics. I think people come to faith because they're looking for a way to understand how God shows up in the world, shows up for themselves, shows up through humanity, shows up for humanity. And from my experience and what I witnessed in these interviews is that the quest for ethics is really rooted in the search for how God is showing up in the world. Everyone wants to get closer to God, to understand God, to unpack what God means for them personally, and how God protects, how God cares for all of us. And a lot of the artists that I interviewed, specifically the artists, that was what they really wanted to express through their art, was how God shows up for humanity in the world, how God cares for humanity in the world, whether that's through ecofeminism, whether that's through social justice, how God stands in the midst of the people. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Okay, I was wondering if you had a chance to maybe look at the artwork in the work of the late Kane Holtfelder from Howard University. And they have put out, years ago, they put out a Bible that they met with biblical scholars, not only here but on the continent, and addressed the coloring of the icons and the coloring of the people in the Bible stories. And American Bible Society put out a Bible with that kind of artwork as well. So you may want to get a hold of that. I'll give the title of Kane Holtfelder's work to Russell for the library, so perhaps you can get a hold of it.
That would be amazing. And that was an American project? That was
Yes.
focused on
Well,
the
it wasn't
Bible?
just, it wasn't just, the American Bible Society did that as well.
Okay. I am not familiar, but it sounds like it's right up my alley. It sounds like I would really,
Yes.
really enjoy that. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation.
Sounds like a great project for one of Dr. Russell's classes.
Shouts out to Dr. Russell.
More questions? Yes, more questions.
Thank you so much, Lakeisha.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for going to my home country and then to the very first town that I always go when I go to Ghana, Ekropon. I go to Ekropon to pray for about 4 days before I go down to where my mother is. So thank you so much for going there, and thank you for your work. I have two questions. The first one is about the rapid growth of Ghana's Christianity. I want to ask you, I know it is very true, all these people are kings and queens. So when you go to Ghana, you see almost like the president, the ministers, everybody, everybody goes to church. Almost everybody is going to church. Every Sunday, millions of people go to church in Ghana. And then you see these arts everywhere, in their buildings, cars, stores, everywhere, schools everywhere. You see, Jenyame and all that everywhere. So I want to ask you, besides the arts and all these pictures and all that, what is it that Ghana is doing that is making them have taken over the whole country for Christ? I know it's not only Ghana, but Nigeria and other part of West Africa. What is it besides what you said that they are doing that we can also learn and then probably replicate here? My second question is about the Battle of Adwa in Ethiopia. You showed the picture, the mural up, and then the picture of Jesus and Mary down in that building. What does it mean? Does it mean that their victory against the Italians was caused by the Lord? Or why do they have these pictures of Jesus and Mary in the building?
So those are very distinct questions, but thank you. They're wonderful questions. Let me answer the second question first, and then the first question to the best that I can consider, because it's a complex question, the spread of Christianity in Ghana. So the mural in Addis Ababa at the St. Miriam Cathedral of the Battle of Adwa, I definitely got the sense that the Ethiopians felt like it was divine providence that they were able to defeat the Italians. I had a great conversation with one of my guides when I was in Aksum, which is the ancient kingdom of Ethiopia, where Christianity first took root. I had a great conversation with my guide, who told me that Emperor Haile Selassie, when he had basically remodeled that entire St. Miriam Church there. And the St. Miriam Church in Aksum is considered like the Mecca for Ethiopian Christian orthodoxy. It's where people would love to travel in their lifetimes if they're able to. And he had said that Haile Selassie said, if I win, so a little bit of context, the Italians came back later on and tried to defeat the Ethiopians again later on in the 20th century. And Haile Selassie made a deal with God and said, God, if you let me win this war, then I will rehabilitate this religious complex. And he won the war. And he rehabilitated the complex. So I do think that there is a sense that their Christianity and their spirituality is a form of empowerment against their enemies, essentially. So that was that's from my assessment and what was shared with me. on your first question about how Christianity was able to spread so fast and so rapidly through Ghana. And you had mentioned, and I didn't get a chance to show this last picture, but you had mentioned how icons are everywhere. Now this is Kumasi. This is St. Peter's Cathedral in Kumasi. And you'll see here the Adinkra icons in stained glass next to, more traditional Western icons. And this is just an example of what you shared about how the synthesizing of Christology through icons is everywhere. But I think that actually gets to the root of your question, is that when Ghana, especially after Ghana gained its independence in 1957, I think there was a concerted effort to embrace the indigenous forms of spirituality and integrate them into the Christian worship. And when that happened, I feel like what I was able to witness with Ghanaians, and this is just one form of how they were able to embrace their indigeneity. They also, I think Pentecostalism was a very big part of the spread of Christianity throughout Ghana because it was a form of expressing the faith that seemed very familiar. And when Ghanaians were able to express their faith in familiar forms, whether that's through textiles, iconography, Pentecostalism, I think that's when all that, Ghanaians felt like they found, that Christianity found a home in Ghana.
Yeah, that's correct.
Remind me to share an essay with you later, Emmanuel.
Okay.
It's a very troubling essay. Bobby has several questions in the chat.
Yeah, they've been busy. We've got great questions online. Let's start with, this is Susan Caldwell.
Hi, Susan. She's good for mine.
Thank you, Lakeisha. This is powerful. Did you notice cultural differences in how art was received in different Christian communities? I was fascinated by the diligence of the Korean artist illustrating the church bulletin each week. Is this a common practice there? Do people in these different communities seek out artists to help spread the gospel?
So that's a great question. So let's just take Korea, for example. The Korean artist that I had an opportunity to interview, Elder Kim, I asked him what made him decide to become an artist, and it seemed to me that he felt called. This felt like a calling to him from an early age, and he is classically trained artist. He's a professor of art, so he's very much enthralled and rooted in the traditions of art, especially as it pertains to Korea. So, when you talk about did the modality of art sort of have diversity based on the countries, I didn't necessarily see that there was a diversity of how the art was chosen. Again, I felt like all of the artists that I met felt like it's kind of like a pastor, asking them how did you decide on what to write? How did you decide to become a minister? They all seemed to feel like they were called. Even the ones in Ethiopia who were of the monastic tradition and, the scribes and the artisans there, they all seemed to feel like this art, they were called to create it as an expression of their faith and as an expression of the sacred. It did take on different forms based on what was going on in each country that made the artists feel like they needed to step up and share their visual theologies, whether that was the war in Korea or whether that was Ghana gaining its independence. There was always something that happened culturally in which the artists felt like it was their time to step up and voice their theologies.
Back to politics. Let's do one more from the chat, and then we can see if we have someone else in person who.
Okay.
We'll be right with you, Dr. Hagley.
This one is from Dawn Curtis. Great job. In light of our church history class, did you encounter, in these syntheses of local culture and traditional Christian doctrine, did anything strike you as more authentic than your own understanding, or the opposite, bordering on heretical?
We learned, so Professor Ramsey teaches our church history class, and we have just been rolling around in this word heresy and what's heretical, and we love it. I mean, I think to your chagrin. So heresy just means, and when the church was forming in its early stages, and trying to really understand their faith, who God was, who Jesus is, and especially in the doctrine of the Trinity. These apologies sort of came out of heresies, or things that would have been considered kind of counterculture, or kind of not in alignment with sort of how the theologies were being shaped and forming. And so when I think about class, especially around this idea, the doctrine of the Trinity, which we've been talking a lot about today, it was really interesting to me to go to Ethiopia and see that, especially Ethiopian Orthodox faith is so different from the faith that I know. And I'll just give an example of that. When I went into the St. Mary's Church in Oxum, I saw this beautiful mural, and I asked my guide, what is this? He's like, oh, this is a mural of St. Mary. And it looked very different to me because there were these people on either side of her, and I was asking a lot of questions about it. And he said, oh yeah, these are the apostles, and this is the icon of the resurrection of Mary. And I said, the resurrection of Mary? Like, I never heard of this before. What resurrection of Mary? So, you know, this was just a fascinating, this is a fascinating form of theology that it was extremely unfamiliar to me, but in a good way. And now that I'm taking church history and we're really looking at how the early theologians, like Justin Martyr and Tertullian, really were wrestling with who is God, what is God. To me, like going to some of these faith traditions and seeing how they've come to understand the same God, you know, was quite eye-opening. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. Dr. Hagley?
Thank you. This was brilliant. So good. So I'm wondering, as you have come back, how has this work shaped you? Are there new questions you're asking? Things that you are looking at in terms of religious art here that you're seeing differently? You just reflect on how this has shaped you.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic question, because I've been sitting with this and discerning my way through this since my husband and I got back from these amazing experiences. And some things that I'm rolling around in is, what does this mean for me? I have this background in art, this background in art history, this background in communications. I was just saying this to my husband this morning, when I started seminary a year ago, I really just had a question. God, what is it? It felt like it was like, that still small voice, and it had been there for a very long time. And one day in Bible study, my minister, Reverend Key, made a comment like, Lakeisha, when are you going to go to seminary? It's overdue. And I said, okay, that I think is what I've been waiting to get a confirmation on. And I started seminary with the question more than an answer. Where is God taking me? Where is God leading me? Now, before starting seminary, I had started a show called Divine Travel Joy, where my husband and I travel around the world, and we look for God in the world, and we made these short videos that we put on YouTube, and it felt like my ministry had already sort of started. And then when I got into seminary and I took world Christianity, and got the chance to do this Valentour Fellowship, it all started to kind of make more sense. Before that, it felt very disparate, but now, as I have come out of this research over the summer, I feel a little bit more clear. Not a whole lot. It still feels kind of vague, but I feel like that question still needs more probing. How do we embody our faith? And to me, I got a lot of clarity on that being an area of focus for me as I continue to explore my ministerial call.
So I want to, before we go, we'll do the online question in a sec, but to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, a couple things about you. You're from Pittsburgh.
I went to school across the street, which was called Peabody High School, and my family's here, and we all went to Peabody High School. My dad, my aunt, my uncles. It was a family affair, so it's like now it's called Obama Academy, but it kind of feels like my life has come a bit full circle because I've lived in many places. But yeah, I literally know this neighborhood. I grew up in East Liberty, or Sliberty, as the natives call it. Yes, I'm very, very familiar, but it's changed a lot.
But so this is just an interesting thing. You grew up here in East Liberty, went to school across the street. You're not an in-person student. You are a hybrid student. You live in Miami, and you're here as a hybrid student. So this is just an interesting thing. And also you've done some really interesting research at the Perez Museum in Miami. And so I wonder, I would be curious to extend Dr. Hagley's question a little bit, to press you on those two things, those two very American things that are about you, your biography, but also some work that you've already done in an American art museum, thinking about religion with them.
Yes.
I didn't tell you I was going to say that, but
contextual analysis, fantastic class, also taught by Dr.
Designed by Dr. Hagley.
Oh,
that's Dr. Hagley's class. So.
Okay, that class was so great, especially in preparing me for the summer to do research. Just going out into the community, learning from the people, learning how to be immersed in environments and not forcing myself onto the environment, but really observing and immersing myself into the environments. So at the Perez, so just a little bit of context, the Perez Art Museum is a wonderful museum in Miami that focuses on the art of Latin, Caribbean, and African American artists. And if you know a lot about the art world, you know that this is quite unique. And they bring the stories of, and just a little bit more context, Miami is very diverse, especially in the Latin Caribbean residents, the people from the Latin and Caribbean part of the world. And so it's fantastic to see this, this global presence in a local context with these artists that are featuring their work. And a lot of their work, again, there was a question around ethics, but a lot of their work really does talk about not only religion, so you'll see work from Brazilian and Haitian artists that are talking about the complexities of their Christian witness and some of their innately African expressions that they integrate into their Christian witness. You'll see Cuban artists talking about their migration from the United States to the US, and these are just a few of the exhibits that I got a chance to see there. And so it really brought it together for me, like this global context, and we have such a global nation right here, and to see it expressed in a way that within the Perez Art Museum, they have these wonderful community experiences. They have Thursday night at the Perez where they open up their doors for artists, local artists to exhibit their work. They open up their doors to have these intercultural and intergenerational conversations, and it's almost kind of liturgical. Mm-hmm. So for me, it is bringing So I'm glad that you kind of pressed this a bit, Professor Ramsey, but it is sort of taking down the barriers of the secular and the religious. It seems to be these like artificial barriers, because when you go into the secular world, there is so much religious expression in the secular world. I mean, in Ethiopia, that's heavily pronounced, but even here in this country, when you go into the secular world, you'll see artists in particular expressing their faith in really Christian artists, dare I say it, expressing their faith in very unique ways. And I really enjoy, and I think that to your question, Dr. Hagley, that's a space that I want to continue to sort of understand how my ministry will show up in that space.
It's great. Lots to unpack. Bobby, chat.
We already covered the other one.
Oh, we did?
Audrey's question was basically what you want to start with.
Okay. Then another question from, yes.
Wish I could do this without popping on the camera.
Kendra.
Hi. This kind of is related to the last question that was on the floor in person, but just the idea of embodiment. I want to understand more about not what you experienced when you got home, but what you experienced as a researcher in these places, besides taking notes and filming and having a lovely voiceover voice. You're really good at that.
Thank you.
But how was your kind of your experience in these spaces? What did you feel, and did you reflect on that separately in a journal?
Yeah. So I went to a lot of services, and some of the services I did not know the language, like when I was in South Korea. But I would leave the service. I went to a Greek Orthodox service, and it was so meditative. I love meditation. And I came out, and I just was so relaxed, so, I just felt like I was able to embody the Christian witness the way that particular faith tradition intends for it to be embodied. Through the music, they burn incense. It's, the art, the iconography on the wall, telling the story of the Gospels. And so when you leave their liturgy, when you leave, you feel filled up, by the Holy Spirit. And I'm not of that faith tradition. I'm not of that specific Christian faith tradition. Or even when we went to an evangelical Ethiopian service in South Korea, that was very interesting in how I experienced that. Again, the liturgical language in Ethiopia is Ge'ez. I didn't necessarily know what they were saying, but I felt it in the singing. And something that was fascinating to me is before service starts, people are they're speaking out these utterances of prayers. And they're just, imagine being in a big room like this, and everybody's saying out loud what they're praying for, all individually though. But it sounds like a chorus, if that makes sense. And so I ended up initially just being so unfamiliar with that mode of confessing of a faith that it took me a little bit of time to really wrap my arms around what I was experiencing. But then as they moved into singing and then into the word, I really felt that I was again feeling how they feel. You know what I mean? And it was a new feeling. It wasn't the same way that I worship. I grew up of the Pentecostal faith tradition, so I do, the speaking in the tongues part, I know a whole lot about that, which it kind of felt more like that intro the first part of the service kind of reminded me of speaking in tongues. But then in my older life, I ended up going to a multi-denominational church that is Methodist and Baptist, which is a whole different experience. But in no way, shape, or form did any of these experiences mirror what I had grew up experiencing. And so it kind of challenged me a bit to experience this worship in a new way. And so sometimes it was elating, and sometimes it was uncomfortable, and there was a lot of emotions in between. So it made me feel a lot of different ways because I was outside of my comfort zone in a major way.
That's really rich. I have many more questions that we can talk about later. I think we have time for one more question. Going once, going twice. All right, and then we're going to hand it over to Bala.
Yeah, and I get to ask one last question. Yeah, thank you, Lakeisha, for the excellent presentation. Just, more or less piggyback from what Scott's question. I'm just wondering, like, what you are in those 3 countries and different probably worship style, and also what you've seen and witnessed and experienced. Is there anything that you feel that you learn from those 3 contexts that will be beneficial to apply within the church context here or within the context anywhere that you see fit?
Well, one of the key learnings I think would apply to any church context is that the embodiment of Jesus has to be familiar, it has to be localized. It makes a difference in the lives of the people, so not preaching at people, but bringing the people in to the conversation, especially for churches that have steep multicultural communities that come from very unique backgrounds, and there's like not one uniform way that those people know God. So bringing those voices in, bringing those experiences in, I think any church would benefit from that, because I saw that in Ghana, I saw that in Ethiopia, where they bring that actual embodiment from the community. So it's like an inside out as opposed to like an outside in. I thought that would be useful for any church. And then as it pertains to visual vernacular, this gets back to embodiment, especially within the context of Protestantism. We have this iconoclastic sort of faith tradition where, there's a lot of questions about how to integrate art without it being blasphemous. And I believe that question, I believe that artists should be brought into that conversation so that there is more of an embrace of it in a way that's meaningful, because the artists are articulating the community. The artists are articulating what's going on in the community. So the community has to, and it gets back to what I just said, like the community has to share what's meaningful for them so that what they get back, it creates a sense of agency.
Thoughts? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that is a great presentation. Let us give a round of applause. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, both of you, Lakeisha and Ryan, for this meaningful conversation and presentation, and also for you all for being here, for the engagement and support that you provide for Lakeisha. We are so grateful for the blessing that you bring to this community and to the church here in the United States. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Bala, for all that you do within the World Mission Initiative, and for believing in me and checking in on me throughout the summer when there were a couple little snafus, but helping me to pivot, you and your team, to make it very meaningful.
Yes, thank you so much. So with that also, probably some of you here are student or online, been thinking and probably brainstorming. Maybe this is something that might be interest for me. So we are going to, application will be accepted for the Valentour for next year. beginning, from December all the way to February 1st. That is the deadline. So if any one of you want an interest to apply for next year, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. bcaleb is at pts.edu is my email, or you can stop by anytime in my office in McKnocker. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much again for a great presentation, Lakeisha.